actually appears on YouTube. Are we?
Okay, I think we're live now. Yeah, so good afternoon, good evening from London, from me, Loco Donovan, the festival director for Zoomed In. And yeah, we're very privileged today to be joined by Alfredo Brillenborg. Thank you so much for joining us. Where in the world are you today?
It's a real pleasure. I'm in Oslo.
Oslo, well, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling in. So yeah, for those of you who've been following our program throughout a week, and hi to all of you in the YouTube. I see Sergio there already, who's been here a lot. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for all your support throughout the week. And we're really excited to present this film as kind of our little closing thing for a week. So we've had quite good internet connection, quite good, no major technical faults throughout the week. Just now, before we went online, my connection started cracking up. So no idea how this is going to work. But I think we're going to start just while we get things ready to screen. I'm going to start by directing you to our website. So you would have seen the program. We're now in the last event, but we have, the fun doesn't stop with the end of the festival program. So we have as well on here our charity print sale, and we very fortunate that a lot of the leading architectural photographers in the world have supported this. So all of the money, all of the profits that have been raised from this have been donated to the Trussell Trust, which supports 1,200 food banks around the UK, and it's really important now more than ever that we're supporting the work that they do. So yeah, Alfredo, I'm going to scroll through these. Do you want to maybe stop me when one catches your eye?
Oh, sure. Very interested to see what you guys are.
So we have about 40 images that have been submitted to our affordable print sale, which is a very rare opportunity to get some of these images at, starting from £25. So, these are very, very accessible prices, and it's very rare you get this kind of chance to purchase and own these prints within that price bracket.
Look, I think we're not seeing your screen.
You're not seeing my screen? Okay.
Oh. We're seeing only a white line.
Let me give that another go.
But we can maybe look at the prints at the end and start by introducing Alfredo. He's a person I admire a lot. The work that you do in Urban Think Tank, you work in a multidisciplinary way, working with the built environment, doing films, architecture projects, doing publications, and your work is world known, really. So it's an enormous privilege to have you here with us. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Urban Think Tank and what you do in the practice.
Well, Urban Think Tank began in Caracas in 1998, very informally. Basically, a bunch of people came together in the basement of my house, and it was to create a collective of people who were interested in thinking about the city. So we, in architects and non-architects. So that's how we created this multidisciplinary group. And it was quite fascinating from the very beginning, because it hit us like at the same time that the political revolution happened in Venezuela. So those of you who don't know, we've been 20 years in a revolution, which is similar to the one that Cuba had in 61, 58 to 61. And however, with the difference that it's kind of manipulated by a new kind of iron curtain, where Russia and China are playing roles for the petroleum of Venezuela and supporting a kind of narco dictatorship. And but in the beginning, it seemed very innocent. Yet we knew that there was a change coming, and the think tank responded to that change, is to look at the marginalized populations of Venezuela.
And then you started working with the marginalized population in Venezuela, and then the rest of the world, and you started covering Latin America.
They wanted to break both our legs at a certain moment, because we really entered into the political hot bed, and we were doing the metro cable and finishing off a bunch of 17 buildings that this cable car terminated in. And And that became a real contagious moment where we had to be party aligned, Communist Party inscribed, or we couldn't continue the work. And we said, no way. And we went to New York. And then from New York, we went to Zurich. And we've been on the road for about 15 years away from Caracas. So, but the interesting thing is we thought the rest of the world was going to look a lot different from Caracas, but we're finding Caracas everywhere. And that's the kind of lemma, but wherever you go, you find a pocket of conflict.
That's very true. Yes. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You have taught in Harvard, in Columbia.
Oh yeah, I've taught, of course, studios, individual studios everywhere as a guest critic from, you name it, from India, Russia, South Africa, all over Europe and America, right? But I've been permanently stationed for the last 10 years in Zurich. Now I seem to be gravitating away from that because our works, we have a building going up in Colombia. It's an art school, and we have a large housing complex going up in the townships of South Africa. And that has really called attention that we need to be back on the ground. So Hubert stayed teaching, and I've gone back to full practice.
To full practice. That's really amazing. And people can see the projects on your website, and they're published on this scene as well.
The new book coming out very soon. It's called The Architect and the City by Hanje Kans, the German Berlin publisher. Should be out by summer.
That's really amazing. And I learned about your work in 2016 in the Venice Biennale. So I saw this amazing film about Torre David, which is a building that I didn't know at the moment. And then you published a book with photos of Iwan Ban, and the whole thing was you had an amazing installation in the Venice Biennale as well, and it won an important award as well.
Yeah. So we were lucky there at the Biennale. We really didn't expect it. In fact, they gave us the worst space in the whole Arsenale, but we took it because no one realized that it was a key space. It was a hinge space because it had the bathrooms very close by. So no one wanted to be next to the bathrooms, but they didn't know that our scheme was to create a restaurant. So we needed the bathroom. And we created a restaurant from Caracas called Gran Horizonte. It's an arepera that serves arepas, which is our local Indian food. It's like our South American version of a hamburger, right? You stuff it with anything you want. And that was the whole idea, was to bring people together to that space, to sit down, eat food, and look at the pictures and the plans and the videos that we had all around. And of course, the pictures and the plans and the videos were all about another world, a complete mind-blowing place that no one could imagine, a 45-story office building turned into a vertical city.
Yes, and which is, so we can maybe see the clip of that film now. We're going to see the the film that you did about Robin Hood Gardens, and then I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions about how you see these two realities and two housing kind of states and realities in the UK and then in Venezuela.
Of course.
So should I share my screen and show the
Torre.
Yeah, so sorry if you wait for me 1 second. So this was supposed to happen after the screening of the film of Robin Hood Gardens, but I think it's very relevant to show it now. So we're going to show it. So I'm going to share my screen here.
Maybe the important thing is that Torre David existed in Caracas, but there are Torre Davids all over the world, squatted buildings all over the world.
Yes. So I'm going to share my screen, okay? And I'm coming back to you in a second. So this is a film that we're going to see afterwards, but first we're going to watch Okay, so we're facing some technical difficulties here.
Okay, well, put Disappearance of Robin Hood Gardens. Go for
Yes,
that.
we're going to do that. So we have that film, and meanwhile, I'm going to log into your website, and we can see the trailer of Torre David afterwards. Okay.
I think actually, sorry, I think I thought my connection was off. Actually, my computer was freezing up because I've been running the whole festival with every like creative software I have on my computer running at once. It's all taken its toll. It froze up, but I'm back now, so I think I can actually play the Robin Hood's Gardens film. Alfredo, would you like to give us a bit of an introduction to it before we get into it?
Yeah. So yeah, we were looking for a story to do in Europe, right? We had done Caracas movies, we've done movies around India, Palestine, Africa, but we needed an interesting story. So we decided to touch upon gentrification in London. It's a big topic, right? People are being priced out. And all of that dream of the housing of the 1970s. Maybe some of you might remember Rem Koolhaas did a show of council housing in Venice. He had one room where he pinned up all the great projects from council that were done by council housing in the 70s in London. And he was very much in awe of that. Well, we decided to go in a 7-year project. By the way, this movie that you're going to see took us 7 years to do. We needed to wait till the demolition. So we began by interviewing people inside Robert and Alison Smithson's building, Robin Hood Gardens. We call it the disappearance of Robin Hood because Robin Hood used to rob from the rich and give to the poor, right? So it's a little bit of a pun and a kind of poke at the idea of where's the welfare state today.
Great. And yeah, I mean, like you said, 7 years of work is a real labor of love. So thank you very much for sharing it with us today. And yeah, I think we're all going to turn ourselves off now and then give you a film. So please sit back, have a glass of red like Alfredo is, and enjoy.
Yeah, I can share mine.
Wow. Well, you know, like I said before we went on air, that's a film I've seen before, but every time, you know, it's still taken aback by it. So yeah, I mean, congratulations. I know it's an old project, but still, congratulations on it. And thank you so much for coming tonight to share it with us. So before we start talking a little bit about it, I just want to say to people on YouTube, Alfredo had a bit of an idea. We're going to do things a bit differently tonight. We're going to put the Zoom link in the comments. I might regret this, hopefully not. So you guys can join into the call as well. I've just been texting someone as well who's in the credits of the film who may be able to join us. But yeah, so it'd be great to see some of you face to face after seeing the comments all week. But yeah, Alfredo, I'd like to start with a question. I think it's really interesting that kind of you've come to London as an outsider and made this film. And why do you think no one from London was making this film?
That's bizarre, and it's a good question. Boy, did I try. I mean, Sarah Wigglesworth was great support, and she made drawings for the remodeling of Robin Hood Gardens as an alternative to add new density, one more floor to the building, and upscale it. And that was rejected by council, and unfortunately didn't gain the support. For me, it's bizarre that the London community of architects, which I think is so strong, right? And you might know it as a gremium, as the and that no one really was able to combat the demolition of Robin Hood. So I mean, in that bewilderment that I found myself when I started to do interviews around London, I said, that gave me more conviction. We needed to archive it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're not, we introduced this as an architecture film, but you're not just archiving the architecture. I mean, very much like Emile Raphael's work we were showing yesterday, this is more a film about people framed through architecture than a film about architecture, maybe.
Yeah, maybe to the audience, we should probably frame that to say, if anyone who thinks architecture is about buildings, they're mistaken. Architecture is about people. And you cannot make a good building if the building doesn't represent the people who use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I found the video fascinating. It's a project that I know well. I told you before that I wrote my final dissertation and my master's at UCL about the project, and I interview people from the community, from the council, from the housing association that was developing the project, and kind of made myself an idea about it. I never got the chance to get into any flat though, so I'm really glad to have been able to see how the interiors actually look. And what were your thoughts about the quality of life within the building? Was that a very impressive project that you would think?
I mean, London is a great city, right? We know it. A lot of things have happened to London. Like, I don't know if I've said it to you before, but Soho for me is another story. Whoever wants to take on Soho. Soho was where Mozart first arrived. We're talking about the 17th century, guys. So Soho was, its fabric of the city was quite unique. It was like a village texture, low, dense texture. And then it's also the place where all the, music venues came. Vaudeville came out there. Theater, of course, as you know. And then the punk movement began in Soho. All the punk bands that you might know played in Soho. And then, of course, later, the film industry. So, and you might say, what? The film industry was in Soho? Yes, because they could rent little apartments and add on as the film production needed to grow and expand. So there was a morphology there that could expand and contract, because it was little buildings that are all connected, right? And today, what's Soho? A gentrified kind of shopping mall. So, for high boutique shops. So for me, there's lots of stories in London that we can really explore. And London yet is the global city. So what I found fascinating about Robin Hood Gardens was that you found a Chinese community, a Pakistani community. You found, an English community, and everyone living together in harmony. So I believe in this hybridity. I believe it as a thesis, and as this thesis of the 21st century is, how do we design spaces for hybrid participation?
Yeah.
So just before we continue with the conversation, I'd like to take this back. So this whole festival really has come together super quick. And Francisco actually organized this screening. We didn't even have the time to talk about it before Francisco talked to Alfredo. I didn't actually know this was happening, but there's a bit of history, because I was there at the screening of this 2 years ago, which was organized by our friend who's just joined us. Manuel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Manuel. Oh, he doesn't have the sound on. Maybe he's muted.
I don't know. We'll come back to him. And like we said, we put the Zoom link in the comments. So if anyone else watching in public wants to join, it's Friday night. Come and have some fun with us. But yeah, let's continue the conversation then.
Yeah, Manuel. Turn on your audio. You know, so Manuel's a urban think tanker. You guys don't know it, but he's one of the originals. Ah, wow. Okay, we lost him.
Manuel Toledo is connecting to audio. He's connecting now, I think, to the
Okay,
audio.
cool. Well, anyway, so
Is he one of the original think tankers, Manuel?
yeah, Manuel's one of the original think tankers, right?
Can you
We can hear you now.
hear me now?
Yeah.
Ah, great. That's fantastic.
Manuel, you're growing your hair out. That's good. Don't cut your hair. Remember the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song. I almost
Yeah, I
cut
do. I think you can hear me now.
No,
Yeah, we can.
We can hear you. Yes.
guys, you guys are an important generation, okay? You gotta make something right. What's going on right now in the architecture schools is bullshit. Everything's, you know, the discourse about architecture is lost. Trust me, it's going in every direction. They don't understand it. COVID will change it all.
There is a little bit of a kind of different lines that architecture is
I can
taking.
hear you.
One of kind of main very important buildings that everybody would see on platforms and architectural platforms, and then another architect that is architecture and city planning that is actually caring about people and avoiding gentrification processes, and maybe
you've got an industry. Architecture is an industry, right? It's an industry, and there's pieces to that industry. The problem is that we cannot become self-servant to that industry, you know. So we need to critically undermine the process of that of the discourse of that industry, and redirect it to gain responsibility again. Architects in the 16th century were the most important spokesmen for politics, for science, for the city. Alberti, Michelangelo, you know, Leonardo, you name it, Serlio, it goes on, the list goes on, Brunelleschi.
Do you think, Alfredo, architects have actually that power of changing things, or is it? Or is
of course they do. If they stop producing developer-driven bullshit architecture.
I was asking you that because many times it's above the kind of responsibility of an architect, that they would work with a brief in a certain way.
Yes, architecture thinks it's a different art than landscape, than urban design. And so they say, give me the brief, I'll make the best building you can on the corner. Right? But if that building on the corner doesn't understand the city and doesn't respond to the greater context of the city, it's not going to be good architecture.
So they do have a responsibility to go further in a way, and to
further in their investigation, right?
Yeah.
But architects have bills to pay. How do they break free from that cycle?
Oh my God! If architects think that they want to survive with an income in the profession as it is, they're dreaming. There's not one firm that's not almost broke. I'm sure even now after COVID, you give it a little hump in the curve and we all falter. So the point is, the best thing we have is our love for the profession, is our engagement in the profession, and the friends we make, and the community we have, and the offices are usually friends and family. So therefore, stick to the reason you started to study architecture. If you want to fall into architecture being a livelihood, forget it. Then you might as well switch right now and, you know, become a chef.
But isn't that, I mean, maybe a chef's not the best to make money either, but, you know, isn't that quite dangerous in that closes architecture to anyone that doesn't have money? And
no, the opposite. You know, I'm fortunate. I came from a well-off background, right? But now in the revolution, we've lost everything. So I'm just a professor of architecture, right? I've been living off a salary at a university. So that's not a big deal. Everyone can access that. So a salary at a university is good, but money's not the issue. There's money around. What's missing is ideas, guys. Ideas, just like you asked me, why didn't any English filmmaker make a film on Robin Hood, right? I don't know. The idea was there. The problem was there. The issues were there. The gentrification of the city, the pushing out of the immigrants. So I don't understand. And the reason is that this is an advice I give. You can't live your life based on practicalities. You live your life based on ideas. The thing that keeps you alive is ideas, engagement in the world.
Mm-hmm. And then my previous question of if it was the role of the architect it's because in my experience, it's really hard sometimes to land those ideas. So there might be ideas, but then it's really, really hard to kind of convince people, key people that you need to convince in order to land and actually build a building, for example.
Yeah. So if the idea is not good enough that you can't attract other people to your idea, then you got to discard it and get a new one. And ideas are cheap. They come a dime a dozen. But what is hard is to carry it through.
Yes, I agree with that, 100%. Should we see the trailer of Torre David so we can
we shift up things? Yeah.
Yeah, let's play that then.
And we're getting a lot of questions as well, so that's good.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, let's all turn off our cameras for a minute then. I'll play this.
Es Cancerbero, Caputo del instrumental. Nosotros sabemos quién somos. ¿Quién eres tú? Ya, dice, en estos tiempos todos se creen que son perfectos. Señor espejo, mostraré ellos sus defectos. Yo, tú mereces si creen cambiar el mundo en un tema. Y ni siquiera pueden cambiar sus problemas. ¿Tú quién eres? El canto los que más critican. Nunca aportas nada, no sabes lo que el hip hop significa. Desde Bambata el rap fue hecho para hacer paz. Hasta que la West Coast no toca el balandreo, vende más. ¿Tú quién eres? Dime. Tu silencio me hace pensar que eres de los que cantan rap para que alguien lo pueda notar en vez de apoyar y callar. En otros tiempos te hubiesen colgado y quemado de más. Dime, si eres acaso que escuchó a Cancerbero, se hizo 2 rimas, sobrenombre y hasta me critica, pero yo creo que tú eres de los que vio a un extranjero, le chupa el cuero en vez de apoyar a los de su guero primero. ¿Quién eres? Te pregunté y no me respondiste. Olvidaste que yo mejoré ya lo que hoy tú descubriste. La antigüedad de nada, sin nada tú hiciste. A mí ya se me está olvidando lo que recién tú aprendiste. Hip hop for my brothers around. The real people know that I got sound straight from downtown. Tengo lyrics que debería donar a ustedes. A ver si representa como se debe. Real hip hop for all my brothers.
So I have to apologize there because we were supposed to show the trailer, but I was downloading the files in between like the 10-minute gaps between events today. I must have got the wrong one, but we went with it, and I feel really lucky that we did because I hadn't seen that film before, and I'm lost for words. I mean, the way it gets into the character of the building and that community, I think it's just, and the shots at the end of that rooftop gym are just iconic. There's no other word for it.
Yeah. I'm really happy you showed it. It moved a lot of emotion, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's due and calling for a little performance on my side. An ode to Caracas. Let me do it for two minutes. And because Caracas is suffering now, people don't know it. But not only the COVID situation, but the revolution. We have the largest refugee crisis at the moment of 10,000 people moving to Colombia and over the borders and over the bridges. So let me just do a little ode to my country. People will appreciate it. I'm sure Manuel will. Caracas, mi Caracas, Caracas nuclear, Caracas punto desbordado en un valle de 1 kilómetro de agua. Caracas célula, Caracas sopa de letras, esquinas desigualdadas, Caracas burbuja, Caracas explosiones de oxígeno, Caracas aldea, Caracas mi palabra peatonal, Caracas sofocada, sofocante, Caracas y el cielo punto suspensivo, Caracas poniente en el Fajardo, amparo de soledades ahumadas, 20%, Caracas furiosa, cotas alzadas, Caracas papel multimetrado, de mongólico ahuecado a tiros, Caracas de Lord motorizado, pontífica Caracas de entierro y malandro de policía. That's it.
I'll raise a water to that.
That's really
A little rap for Caracas.
But I found the film absolutely striking, and both films, they have a language in themselves, and you're kind of looking at people and how they inhabit those spaces, and the formality within the formality in Torre David. It's something that blows everyone's mind, I think. Seeing people how they would build their own houses and their own kind of refugees within this building that was meant to be something else. It's absolutely striking.
So maybe Luke asked a very pertinent question: how do we make a living, right? Doing this kind of stuff. And I would have to say, look, a writer can only write. An architect needs to reflect on the city, right? The city is his
Canvas.
his language, right? So what I would say to everyone, the best place for a writer to write a novel is probably the worst room. You owe a lot of rent, people banging on the walls, pipes banging, you're probably looking into an elevator shaft. So what I'm saying is that comfort and ease is not conducive to the right discourse. So I believe that if we all suck it up and stop doing our nice little renders and our nice little shadows on our buildings and producing some very beautiful drawings, but actually get to the materiality, sink yourself in, sink your teeth into the reality of what's around you. And whether it's London or Caracas or wherever, right? Sink yourself in and reflect deeply and find some way in which the tools that you have, narratives tools that you have, whether it be architecture, drawing, cinematography, or maybe even rapping, right? So tell the discourse of the city, because right now what we're doing is just lightly stroking the wonderful art of architecture, but we're not really getting into the meat and the substance of it.
Well, Alfredo, I got a question to you and Becca. You talk about, I guess this relates to your film work, well, the city a lot, and I guess what Rem Koolhaas is doing at the moment has maybe flipped that conversation a bit, and a lot of people are talking about outside of cities. What do you think of that?
Well, that's a big funny story. Of course, Rem is urban. All he's saying about the rural is just another way to talk about the urban. What he's saying is the rural is urbanizing. The whole show is showing how the rural is urbanizing. So his obsession is, let's look at the way that urbanization has arrived in the rural. Whether it be big boxes for Amazon, or whether it be incredible infrastructures like the Swiss are digging under tunnels, under mountains, under things, or whether it be the exploitation of the gorilla parks in Uganda or Rwanda, because he does touch on that. So whatever it is, it's the city coming to the rural. So it's just, he flipped the argument because he was just so bored of talking always about the urban. But it's the same story. It's the same coin. It's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I can't argue with that. Another question, kind of changing the conversation in a different way. So I like that both of your films that we showed today are about projects that are timely. You know, if you go back in 10 years, they're not going to be there. It's not going to be the same. And Robin Hood Gardens in particular, there's controversy about the Biennale and how they physically preserved it as well. And I'm just want to ask you, how else can we, I guess we can preserve these things in the memory, but that's got an expiration to it. You know, it can't be shared like it can with a film. What other ways can we preserve these moments in architecture? And actually, is there a value in preserving moments in architecture, or should we just be thinking about the future?
No, I think there's a huge value in, if you can preserve it through photography or filmmaking or whatever, is writing about it, right? So there's a beautiful, beautiful essay by a South American that I absolutely adore, which is Cortázar, Julio Cortázar. He's probably the best Latin American writer today. I would say Gabriel Garcia Marquez has that throne, and Borges had it before. But I would say Cortázar is the most contemporary, although he's dead now. And Cortázar wrote an essay, a very short essay about Calcutta. So in that essay about Calcutta, he described Howard Station. I don't know if any of you have been in Calcutta, but if you go to Howard Station in Calcutta, you will, it's a mind-blowing experience. You see, you know, not only people, you know, asking for rupee, bakshish, rupee, mister, but you also see multitudes of people eating off the floor, camping out. You see, it's just the mass of individuals trying to get on a train and packing into the to the windows, and faces rubbed against the glass and stuff. And it's an experience that's unique. And he writes that this is an experience that one has to have. It's an obligated experience about humanism. So if we do not have these kind of, if we don't venture out into the world as architects, how are we going to design? In other words, what I'm trying to say is you're only as good an architect as you have ventured out into the world. So what your architecture only symbolizes is how you reflect your personal experience. Now, at the same time, let me give you a parallel story. You can buy a book in the old bookshops of New York, London, or Paris, and you can see poverty depicted, beautiful photographs of a lady without teeth, of a poor child in India. You can, and that book costs 30 francs. And what you're looking at is actually angels. Those people represent angels. They are the most pure form of individual in the world, because they have nothing, yet they survive. And so what I'm trying to say is, if your heart is not empathic and doesn't understand that it's not the photograph to put in a book, but it's actually the action to change that reality. If you don't understand that, then you don't understand what your role as an architect has been and will be. Because in the book of Modern Architecture by Kenneth Frampton, which covers 100 years of the best architects from Macintosh to Aravena, if you want. In that book, every single architect has responded to a social need. The continuous fiber in that book that makes quality design is the fact that you're addressing a very urgent and very needy issue in your own country, whether it be Utzon in Scandinavia with Kingo housing, or whether it be the Russian constructivist workers' clubs, or whether it be Aravena's social housing. That book shows and says modern architecture, and the role and responsibility of the architect is to engage in the difficult issues of humanity.
Can I ask you, I have a question for you, Alfredo, and Manuel as well. You have participated in this project, so you have in the films. So this, in a way, is documenting a reality and showing it to people that wouldn't have visibility of that reality. So these documentaries, but in a way, they want to start some debate and kind of kickstart some action by politicians and people that have the power to kind of take that action. Have you seen any effect after people? Have you seen the documentaries? Kind of Torre David is for 2015, 14. The Robin Hood Gardens is from 2018. So we already kind of have seen some action arising from those films. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think the Robin Hood Gardens debate 2 years ago, we launched it in London with a fantastic film festival, which I won't say too much, but you can say later, Manuel, about. So the debate on the gentrification of London is huge, right? We call it Hackney Whack, right? You know, the whole London Olympics was hacking away at the very essence of gentrification by bringing all that infrastructure and into the neighborhoods around the Olympic Park, right? So if we, but at this, so in that sense, and on the other side, the political debate, which maybe Torre David initiated, was maybe housing doesn't need to be a finished apartment with a key that is sold to you with a mortgage. So maybe we can give you raw space and do-it-yourself conditions, and maybe like a whole IKEA of solutions. And maybe you can finish your apartment yourself, right? But we need to change the legislation. But that's coming. The problem is that we've been living for the 20th century, 100 years, right? 120 years. We've been living with this idea that the city is a commodity that needs to be parceled and commoditized. And actually buildings are depositories of capital, right? And who cares what those buildings do and are? They're just simply assets that are exchanged and are commoditized, and they become derivatives, in fact. However, 5,000 years previous, we were building cities that were incremental, that were community driven, that were, you know, from Fez in Morocco to even, you know, early moments of London. Now, London, certain cities, London, New York, Paris, have already the effects of the 19th century bourgeoisie, right? Where the city became, let's say, the playground of the upper class. And they want to keep it that way. In fact, the city is closing itself and is becoming a gated community, because you and I, if we don't have the income, if we don't have a steady job, if we can't mortgage our payments, right? If we're not a credible individual, we can't access an apartment in the city. Mm. And that's got to end, because the city's for everyone. No one said you are allowed or not allowed to enter the city, right? And And that argument is super important. And I think that's what Robin Hood Garden tries to make, is that condition of social housing, where the word social housing is 80% of market rate, that's not going to fly.
So there's a whole, in a way, there's a whole system or a condition in which we're working right now. And we keep blaming that, but in a way that stops us as well from finding new solutions. Yeah, that's...
But if we form a strong enough network and coalition, and we actually start to bond and work together and forget our egos, our signature as a brand, as a commodity, our architecture firms as an image production, if we start to actually unite and coordinate our actions together, we might have a voice again. And that happened in the 70s.
We could. This is a fascinating debate. We can keep debating this, and this is potentially a future event that we will organize to continue this discussion. Manuel, you haven't been able to participate much in the discussion. What are your thoughts on everything that we are talking right now?
Well, I think, can you hear me well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think one interesting point is about the situation today. COVID is a certain level of, it's going to flatten some stuff that we are very asymmetrical before. For what the architects can do in situations like this, I'll say it's very interesting because, as Alfredo mentioned, this level of disruption is which should be the ground floor for new ideas to come up. And from my side, I see always this parallel between filmmakers and architects, which they have to come with very novel ideas in which you need to prove that you're going to make it, and you need to convince people that your idea is good enough to be able to get capital or money to do this stuff. So this is a parallel where you can actually trigger good ideas in a moment of a void, a vacuum, you can say. People is somehow frozen in this sort of paradigm shift, if we can call it. And if you are able to put those ideas in some people's heads, or especially people that can make decisions, I think architects have a very good chance as filmmakers to pass through their ideas and get them done. I agree completely with Alfredo in the sense of get out of your comfort zone and try to see what it's out there, because in these four walls that unfortunately we are locked down today, you're not going to find the answers, nor the inspiration for those ideas to brew in your head. So I had the fantastic experience of being in Caracas for the time where that film was shot. And that was a very fertile ground for ideas. I mean, everything was around you, it was a bit of a mess, but I do recognize myself that was very fertile ground for fantastic ideas. So I hope that today, with this situation that we are going through, a lot of people, especially architects or creatives, if you want to put it that way, can actually wise up and trying to come with new ideas that can bring solutions and perspectives that are vitally needed today.
What are your thoughts on both Manuel and Alfredo on the whole debate on modernist architecture and the failure of modernist architecture? And in a way, people saying, well, whenever we gave the responsibility to architects, they did create this utopia that was not really going anywhere. What are your thoughts on that?
That's totally wrong. So modernism begins with the Russian constructivists. They were very clear. They were progressive. They were, you know, whether it be Liszewski, whether it be, Ginsberg apartment blocks. He was innovating with the duplex apartment, and he was doing facades with cow dung. You know, he was taking cow dung and then stuccoing it to make insulation, to better insulation for the building. And that's the Ginsberg, Moshe Ginsberg block in Russia that's been restored now. So early stages of modernism were right on point, right on track. Le Corbusier's domino house was actually to resolve the the housing crisis post-World War I in the most derelict situation of making an open frame that could be finished with the rubble of the First World War. You could fill the block in, right? So modernism in its very initial conception was wonderful. And certain modern architects never stopped being wonderful, Alvarado being one, or, you know, and others. But the problem is modernism turned into a style. We know this, the international style. What every architect today doing cool work is somehow reflecting only modernism as a style. But they're not reflecting that modernism was all about innovation in process. Right? And so that whole element of discovering what kind of a process results in a form of a building is really missing in the debate. In fact, I insist that the more hybrid you are, the better. The more you combine that your building responds to infrastructure, landscape, architecture, and social demands, the better. In other words, your building as an object might represent more hybrid functions than the one that it was singly prepared for.
I'd like to ask a question. So before I do, I'd say hi to Joas from our print partner, Image Print Center. So thank you for joining us. Of course, the Zoom link's in the description if anyone else wants to join us too. But I'd like to put a question back. I completely agree that in architecture, we need these new radical ideas, but with radical ideas, there's risk. And, you know, we're talking about architecture kind of in an abstract way, but we're also talking about people's lives, you know, the places people live, the places people work, etc. How do you kind of deal with that risk, and, you know, who's culpable for the failure, and how do you manage that, and how do you kind of stop that messing with people's lives when it does inevitably sometimes go wrong?
Yeah, so architecture is always going to be a failure. We're predisposed to failure. Why? Because things change so rapidly and you never get it right. But you can get it 80% right? There'll be always an element of failure. Yeah, from Frank Lloyd Wright's houses leaked, Johnson Wax building leaked, Le Corbusier's buildings leaked. You know, they were trying and experimenting with new materials, new ways of putting together things, and new programs, in fact, and new structure elements. So there was a lot of failure in those processes. And I would say many of the housing blocks that we know today that are very famous, whether it be, you know, Karl Marx Allee, or whether it be, you know, Robin Hood Gardens, for instance, they labeled it as a failure. Yet we saw in the film today that it wasn't labeled as a failure by the residents. They were pretty happy inside that. Right? So this idea that things need to change is something that we need to fight. In fact, I think most of the city should not be changed at all. It should just be added on to. In other words, a new layer should be added onto the city that would fulfill all the density we need. We don't need to knock down any building today. Why? Because buildings have embodied energy. And that embodied energy, if you knock it down, you're already going to start with a zero carbon credit, right? So you're going to have to fight back. And no building is able to produce enough carbon savings to compensate for the demolition of all the oil that it takes to demolish those materials. So I believe that we should work with the existing city. We should add on to that city intelligently, and we should probably not do anything new on greenfield sites. So there's a couple of rules that could be that could be established that would already set us in a better track with respect to the city.
Joas, hi, you just joined us. You want to add something fresh to the conversation?
Hey, well, very interesting. I came from Brazil, a place where slums are everywhere. I have, like, in my own city, Salvador, I have a slum that has 700,000 people living in one single slum. And Rio is another example. Have entire community, can fit entire city inside of a slum. And it's so difficult to rearrange that reality, you know, to replace, not really, to reallocate that people, and try to build something that bring dignity to that population, I would say, you know, because that is their places. To take them out and move to a better place is very tough, and get projects that can actually be cheap, but at the same time useful, at the same time brings the community together, and plus fight against the government interests. You know, I completely understand what Fred is saying. Is a tough world and very hard to change.
Well, you know, Salvador was the inspiration for Lina Bobardi. She had a house in Salvador.
Have you been there before?
Yes, and that whole black African culture that arrived in Salvador is probably the most fascinating thing Salvador has. So you're living in an incredible place. So yes. to respond to that, Parisopolis in Sao Paulo has 100,000 people, right? Probably has about 80,000 people in the Rio de Janeiro. So all of those communities, those favelas, are incredibly established.
Yeah.
All we need to do is to bring in the missing infrastructure, the schools, maybe a little park, maybe
the basic,
the basic, a little bit of more of access, cable cars, whatever you want, you know, access to them. So they don't need much. The houses are okay. They're pretty much okay. They need sewage. So what we need is a retrofit, which is only just because the rest of the city, of the middle class city of Sao Paulo, Rio, Salvador, has all of those amenities.
Yeah.
So if you're an elected politician and you have a budget for the year, where do you spend it? You spend it in the poorest and the most miserable areas. And that's what the ministers and the mayors have to do out of responsibility.
Yeah, that's a theory. In theory, if they have the budget, they should spend this community, but they don't. They have a lot of priorities. I think that's one of the things that COVID-19 are expecting to change the world and change priorities. You know, one very, like, is another subject, but when you pay, another day I saw, I think it was a Spanish scientist. She was saying when you pay $1 million a month for a football player and $2,000 for bioscientists, then you have what we have.
Yeah, but you see, what's going to change is, did you see how the developed world is dealing with COVID? They're dealing in a very sophisticated way, right? $1 billion, 1 trillion budget increase, you know, printing money like crazy in order to combat COVID, build hospitals, make beds. You think the developing world is going to stand for that anymore? Because they will react to calamity, to crisis in their own country, printing $1 trillion, whatever. And then the developed world, the undeveloped world is just suffering with no attention to crisis. There's going to be a new world order who won't stand anymore for this asymmetrical situation.
That's the hope, but that's the hope, because in the first world, like Europe, US, we have the luxury to stop and still get paid. When you go to slums, favelas, they can't stop. If they stop working, they work to get the money the same day to buy the food of the day. Right? They're not going to have a government pay 80% of the salaries. They can stay home. No chance. So countries, undeveloped countries, or they work or they die. Simple
So
like
we're
that. You
living
can't
in
stop.
Right. So we're living in a global urbanized planet. The moment you see how out of China came a global pandemic, right? That was carried by one individual and then it progressed. If we don't understand that we're living in one urbanized planet and that the effects of one place can affect another intrinsically, and if we don't start to think and implement with a global order, with a global passport, with a global idea of the economy and the resources, then we will not achieve anything. We actually have to have more of a collective vision for the world. And I think
I see a lot of chin stroking from your corner. Do you want to add in as well?
No, I think this discussion is very timely, and as you say, well, Brazil, Venezuela, you know, and Chile, well, two Chileans in the screen. This is real. I mean, nothing after this is going to be the same. At least I hope that's not going to be the same, because the change is going to be so massive, and the side effects or the collateral damage, you can call it, is going to be so deep for society that you will need a bunch of people that stays awake and actually do progressively collaborate to this change. I think architects somehow, they have this vision that can help to develop. I mean, say favelas, of course, favelas cannot stop. Those are kind of the 24/7 cities of the global south. You know, they do not stop. You can see also Santiago in Chile that they were saying, the city stopped because we have a crisis and we cannot go. But the reality that the public transport was full. I mean, the city, the people that has to go to work to feed a family, doesn't matter what COVID you bring to the 21, 27, doesn't matter. They have to go to work to pay a living, a daily living. And that situation will for sure trigger a lot of unexpected things. And we still don't see that things. I mean, politicians, they think that they can actually make measures in the parliament and decide for people to follow a path or a protocol, and that's not reality. So we are living in a world that actually has two coins, as Alfredo mentioned, and the urban and the rural, but you also have a real perspective where people can have the luxury of staying home for their safety, while other people, or most of them, they don't have that luxury. They cannot stay home, and they have to endure this reality of being out there and risking their life for bread, you know.
And if there's one thing that we're going to see is the first mover. In other words, innovation is coming, and you have to understand artificial intelligence. You have to understand the whole new science that is proliferating on and the potential of how can we better coordinate through networks and algorithms. How can we better coordinate for one sole purpose, is to benefit humanity. In other words, so we know all these COVID apps, how to measure people, how to see what neighbors are infected, etc. You know, and all of that that's just beginning, is to look collectively, what science can we create around a collective united urban planet. And if there's one thing for architects to respond to, it's housing. Housing is the first step, and it's for protection, for health, for shelter, for being, for loneliness, etc. So innovate in housing models, and that, I tell you, whoever jumps on it will hit a gold mine.
Wise words. Completely agree.
And I think we're coming close to 2 hours, so it's been a great conversation. We could go on for longer, but I think we're going to wrap it up soon. But I think it's kind of crazy because this started as a photography festival. We're just talking about cameras and stuff, and now we're talking about New World Order, and I think it's great. So I want to kind of end on a more expansive question. Talking about, so we've talked, Alfredo, you mentioned that we're in one planet, one urban system. Do you think there's going to be a day where we have a 2-planet system, and with the possibility space travel is bringing us, and is that going to work in a way where we're just going to copy and paste onto there, or is it going to be a separation, so there is a planet A and a planet B, and there's a new class division maybe there?
I think the space travel is quite interesting because conquering space and inhabiting space and creating a life on another planet is a huge breakthrough in the human endeavor, right? So I think as an experiment, as a dream, as a potential, it's fascinating, and it opens up the imagination. How much will that be a reality? I differ to agree that the future is going to be on a planet B. I think we've got this planet. This is our planet. It's healthy. It's got the right environment for us. I don't see us living on Mars in a space capsule.
What worries me a little bit about that topic is that often a lot of resources are spent kind of in this efforts to find a planet B and take people there, and a lot of people actually, we don't do, I think, enough efforts in planet Earth to actually maintain and improve the situation in which we're living in, for the environment and socially as well. As you were saying, I think that we have an agreement that everyone agrees that there is a problem that we need to tackle worldwide, in Europe and in Latin America and different continents. You have a housing problem. You have kind of the same problems, but to a different extent. And as you were saying, Alfredo, we do need very radical solutions.
It's funny that they brought up Mars because, of course, the Design Museum in London just did a show on Mars, very popular. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, is Lydia Kalipolitis, who wrote a book on closed worlds. So I think this whole Mars exploration will create certain technologies about closed worlds, closed environments. How do we protect the air, the smog, the light, the energy? How do we best use those resources? And I think it will then bounce right back. That exploration will bring new technology that will actually enhance our life on planet Earth, on the mothership.
And for the other side, I mean, this is very like Jules Verne in the 21st century, because after all, we are completely unable to harvest the amount of energy that is needed for such an endeavor. We are like a little bit of an advanced monkey with a better stick. We are unable to harvest a source of energy that will allow us to do such a thing. So we're still dreaming. We are very far away from actually doing such a thing. So just keep doing it. Jules Verne did it in the 19th century, and we just can keep talking about these things, but we're going nowhere. We're still here.
Let's break it down into percentages. There'll always be star architects. There'll always be signal buildings, brand buildings, right? Well, let's not worry about that. That's normal. There'll always, 90% of the morphology of the city is going to be self-built, no architects, just some kind of amorphic texture, right? And we can intervene in about 10% of the city. And we as architects, as thinking as maybe elite trained professionals, we can just make kind of the lighthouse, the beam, the kind of, we can maybe with our little interventions leave some element that could be followed by a next generation. And that's all we need to do. And we need to just keep on building upon the experiment of Kahn, of Alto, of Bucky, of so many architects who have been important in the past. And we add our little dot in the map.
Absolutely.
And we leave it as a beacon for new generations to come along.
I think that with the whole discussion, we just realized that we will have to repeat these events in any future festival, and we'll have to have a 4-hour event to have a proper discussion. It has been really
Proper marathon. We should do them 24/7. 24-hour marathon discussion films.
Yes, absolutely. We completely agree to that.
I think this is becoming a dangerous game for me because I dropped out of architecture school to go into photography, but now you're making me want to go back, and that's going to be a very expensive decision for me.
Well, if you follow the recent dropouts of Harvard, like, and people like Bill Gates and Facebook, owner, creator, I think you're on the right track. Probably dropping out of school is a good thing. You took a decision, a hard one, and that's probably giving you an edge.
Well, yeah, thank you, Alfredo, and thank you to thank you to Emmanuel as well for joining us. We texted like halfway through the event, do you want to come on? And he did, and Joas the same as well. So thank you to all of you just for kind of giving us your Friday evening. It's been great fun, and we had a really good discussion.
By Robert Frost. There are two paths you can go on. One is the most traveled path, the one that's most easy, and the other one's the less traveled path. And you took the less traveled path. So I commend you on it, and I tell everyone, take the less traveled path. Thank you.
I hope that's a brilliant note to leave us on. And I think kind of that's what we've tried to do with this festival, and that's what I hope everyone will continue to do so moving forward. So this is kind of brings us to a nice end of the week. Thanks. I've just been overwhelmed by the response from everyone. So thank you for following us along, and thank you for sticking with us for 2 hours on a Friday night. There's not much else better to do now, is there? But we still really appreciate it. Just to end up nicely, I want to thank all our partners for the festival. So our media partners of the Zine on the Tuesday, and AP Almanac, Architectural Photography Almanac for the rest of the festival, Neve Agency, our communications partner, and Image Print Center, our print partner. So just to end up as well, everyone in the festival has given their time for free, and it's been really, really, really appreciated it. We have people kind of world leaders in their field coming on. And if you did enjoy it, we'd like to ask, maybe you could consider contributing to the Trussell Trust in our name. So we're doing a charity print sale in order to raise funds for that, with some fantastic photos at outrageously cheap prices. And Joas from Image Print Center, our print partner, do you want to maybe pick out one or two that you think people should be buying to support the cause?
Me? You talking with me?
Joas, yeah, please. You're printing them, so tell us which ones people should be buying.
Well, I think the Dennis Gilbert, the black and white Dennis Gilbert, this one, the number 11, is beautiful. It's a nice shot. The Terminal 4 by Mike is absolutely incredible. I really like that shot. And this is, if you screw down a little bit more, there's one on the bottom. There we go.
Things delayed, yeah.
Yeah. The number 30, 35, 34 and 35. One is by Andy Stagg, and the 35 Alex Stern.
My connection's not on my side tonight.
The black and white, the 34 and 35 is one of my favorites.
Here we go. We're getting there.
Yeah, this too. 34 and 35, absolutely beautiful images.
What about you, Alfredo? Do you have any favorite one?
I think they're all fantastic. I would go to the website and check them out individually with time and careful.
And probably everyone should do the same and visit the website.
I kind of like that Andy Stagg number 33. That's interesting.
Andy Stagg, yeah.
Alfredo, have you ever had a chance to visit Milton Keynes?
Yes, of course. And it's a fantastic place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks all joining us. And it's zoomedinfestival.com if you want to support that. And yeah, I guess we have to work out a way to, you know, we've got to come back at some time. So, you know, do get in touch if you've got ideas about how we can do this again in the future. And
I'm with you guys.
yeah, and we appreciate that. So thanks. I'm gonna end the stream now, but thank you everyone at home for joining us, and thank you to everyone on the panel for being with us today.